All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Joni Kresich from Livingston. I'm past board chair, part of my Livingston affiliate, and active in lots of other Northern Plains activities, gratefully. We have two very special guests today, Olivia Vesovich and Nate Bellinger. Our guests played a pivotal role in the historic success of the constitutional lawsuit, climate lawsuit held v. Montana. That win was celebrated all around the world. It was a proclamation of the highest order. It proclaimed what we in our Northern Plains community believe so deeply, that we have a responsibility to our youth to provide a healthy, vigorous, and thriving environment for them to inherit. It said that sacred compact, the one between the generations, will be honored. Olivia, a plaintiff in the case, was one of 16 young people from across the state who sued Montana for violating their equal rights to a healthy environment, to life, to dignity, to freedom. Nate is a senior staff attorney at our Children's Trust and served as the lead attorney in this very historic case. In August of 2023, Judge Kathy Seeley ruled wholly in favor of the youth, enshrining into law science-based protections for children's fundamental rights. Today, Olivia is a student at University of Montana, studying to become a high school English teacher, and she continues to participate in local climate activism. And Nate continues to work to protect the constitutional rights of youth to a stable climate system, and he advocates for science-based solutions to the climate crisis from his home base in Eugene, Oregon. Thank you so much, Olivia and Nate, for joining us today.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It's just such a joy and honor to be here with you all today to hear more about the great work that you all are doing and to share a little bit about what we're doing in our Children's Trust and the important Held v. State of Montana case. So our plan for today is I'm going to start with a little introduction of our Children's Trust, if you're not familiar with our organization. And then Olivia and I are going to talk you through the held case, what happened at trial, the decision, and where we go from here. So our Children's Trust we're unique. We are the world's only nonprofit law firm dedicated exclusively to advocating for the rights of youth and children for a constitutional right to a stable climate. And there are three principles that guide the work that we do. And the first is we trust science. So we bring science into the courtroom and work with a lot of amazing experts to do that, to show that our reliance on fossil fuels must end and that there are alternatives to providing safe and clean energy. The second is we trust children. And so all of our cases are brought on behalf of youth. And of course, youth are least responsible for causing climate change, yet are those that are most impacted by it. So as advocates, it's our job to elevate and empower their voices, their stories, especially in courtrooms where we seek judicial orders to protect their fundamental rights. And then finally, we trust democracy. And we, of course, have a constitutional democracy here in Montana and in the US, which means that when the political branches are acting in a manner that harms children and violates their rights, they have an opportunity to seek redress in the courts. And courts are empowered to protect children and to protect our planet. So you can see here where we are active in the US. We also have a number of support a number of cases around the world too. But we have cases coast to coast, Virginia, Florida, Alaska, Hawaii, Utah, obviously Montana. And then we have 2 federal cases in federal courts in Oregon and Washington. And we are always developing new cases. There's no shortage of work to do here. But today, of course, we're going to talk about Held v. State of Montana. So you can see here, this is a case that was brought on behalf of 16 youth plaintiffs from across the state of Montana. And the plaintiffs were between the ages of 2 and 18 when the case was filed in March 2020, and have, of course, grown up a fair amount since then. And Ricky Held is, the case, the case is named after her, and she's from Broadus, and her dad's here today. Hi, Steve. And here again, you can see the amazing youth plaintiffs in this case. It's just been such an honor to represent them. So this case, it's a little bit different than a lot of cases in the sense that we're challenging Montana's systemic fossil fuel energy system. So we introduced evidence at trial showing how for at least 30 years, the state has never denied a permit to a fossil fuel company seeking to extract coal, oil, or gas, burn oil, coal or gas, and also to permit the transportation of fossil fuels through Montana. So the state has a long-standing and ongoing process of approving literally every project that comes before it. And so that's the energy system we're challenging. And we do that through also challenging 3 specific laws. And the first is the Montana State Energy Policy. And this state energy policy actually had provisions that called on the state to increase the development and utilization of fossil fuels. That law was actually repealed by the legislature 2 years ago, right before trial. So in effect, we've already prevailed on that issue. And then the 2 other laws are provisions of MEPA, or the Montana Environmental Policy Act, which I'm sure you're aware of. And the first is what we've called the climate change exception or limitation to MEPA. And that prohibits state agencies from considering climate change or greenhouse gas emissions when they are doing environmental reviews and considering whether or not to issue permits for fossil fuels. They cannot consider climate change. And the second one is what we've called the judicial prohibition. And that says that even if the state does a flawed or deficient MEPA analysis, courts are not allowed to block that project from going forward. So these are specific laws we've challenged that are effectuating and allowing the state to move forward with this fossil fuel energy system. And as I think you've gathered by now, it's a constitutional case. So this case is brought under Montana's constitution, which is an incredible document. We've argued that the fossil fuel energy system and these laws violates the plaintiff's rights to a clean and healthful environment, but also violates the right to individual dignity and equal protection of the law, and their rights to safety, health, liberty, life, and property. And Montana's constitution also explicitly states that these rights shall be enjoyed by those under the age of 18. So there's a lot of really strong constitutional provisions that this case is based off of. So as I said, we filed the case in March 2020. It took us about 3 years to get the case to trial. The state fought very, very hard to keep this case from going to trial. I think they filed 10 different motions to keep the case from going to trial. So they did not want all of this evidence to come out in court. But despite their attempts, despite, they went to the Supreme Court twice, all of those efforts failed, and we did get our trial in June of 2023. And before I turn it over to Olivia to talk about her experiences at trial, I just want to note who our first witness was, Mainan Ellingson, who I suspect many of you are familiar with. She was the youngest constitutional delegate in 1972 and was very instrumental in getting the right to a clean and healthful environment in the Constitution and in drafting the preamble. So she kicked things off for us as our first witness at trial, which was just a really, really powerful moment to hear her talk about what she did 50 years ago and what the delegates were concerned about, and now seeing it all kind of come to fruition in this trial and held. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia to talk about her experiences at trial.
Hi, so my name is Olivia, and this case is a case of love for Montana. Each one of us, 16 youth plaintiffs, we love Montana. We love the land, we love the people, and we love the animals and plants that live here. And this is what we're fighting for. And with Mainan Ellington, youth have always been at the forefront of social change, no matter what this century or decade is. And so I'm really grateful that we were able to have these tools to be able to have the wisdom of our children's trust come and give us a platform so we can actually use our voices and have our voices heard in the Montana State Court system. And so here are some pictures of me from trial. And I think that I got into this case when I was 16 years old, and I felt like my voice didn't matter and like I wasn't being heard. And that's all I wanted to do, was I wanted to be able to speak out for those who don't have a voice. And when I got my ability to talk, I got to tell my story, and each one of us plaintiffs got to tell our own individual climate story. And what I want everyone to know is that every single person has a climate story. Every single individual in this entire world is impacted by climate change, and we all have our own unique impacts. And so this trial was able to highlight that, and our voices were able to uplift the rest of voices that aren't heard from Montana youth, and we were able to uplift them to the whole world. And I make art in relation to climate change. It's just always been a source of catharsis for me. And I think that creativity is one of my guiding forces. And it's also a really fun way to get to communicate how climate change makes me feel. And so the painting, her name is Gaia, which Gaia is Mother Nature. And it was a painting that I did. These are both art pieces that I did when I was 16. And so these are pieces that speak to that, my voice then, and still now. And this painting is a painting of climate despair and of climate and how it makes you feel so devastated and like it's so hard to keep working. But I have these flowers overcoming it because these are little parts of hope. And this is a case of hope. And this is only the beginning. This is a precedent-setting case that is going to be giving us little seeds of hope so we can keep working and giving action, and we can now hopefully make sure that the fossil fuels stay out of our state. And then the mermaid tail, she is made of plastic bags, and it's about how I think that the reason humanity has let climate change come to this level is because we see ourselves as a separate entity from nature. We do not see ourselves as part of the natural world, and we are natural beings. And when we live in harmony with nature, nature lives in harmony with us. And this part is the part that that's disconnected from us. And we feel disconnected from our waterways, and water is life. And now water is filled with microplastics, which are a petrol product. And my favorite part of trial wasn't necessarily me getting to testify. That was really special, but my genuine favorite part was getting to listen to my fellow plaintiffs testify. We had known each other for a while, but we just hadn't really, I don't know, you really learn so much about them, their climate stories in trial. And so this is a picture of Ricky Held, our new plaintiff, and this is her ranch. And she testified first, and her testimony, it just made me feel so empowered to tell my story, and it made me feel so proud of everything that we've accomplished together, especially Ricky. She is such a powerful human, and her story is so important to the story of Montanans and ranching, because this is a big part of our Montana system, and she, I think, embodies a Montanan so beautifully. And then this is Badge and Lander, and they are both named after, what ones are they named after? They're named after Montana landmarks. The Badger 2 medicine and something else, but you guys might know. And so they are just very special people, and I think they gave a really unique voice to our case, and they hunt and fish, so that's the only meat that they consume is the food that they've hunted, which I think most Montanans can relate to. Not most, but a lot of Montanans can relate to hunting as a food source and living in harmony with nature. And climate change impacts their ability to feed their family, and it impacts the animals' ability to repopulate. And this is Sarah, and she is from the Flathead Indian Reservation. And these are images of huckleberry bushes. And I know we all love huckleberry picking here. And these are the same bushes in the same area, but different years. And we can just see the impacts of how our food and our food sources and our entertainment sources are being destroyed by climate change. And it was just really impactful and powerful to have us from all over Montana talking about how we can literally see climate change impacting us. And clearly the courts listened. And we also had 10 of the coolest experts ever. I learned so much about this, and we actually have 2 right now. We have Dr. Byron's. Dr. Lori Byron was she's a pediatrician, and she was so, yeah, give her a round of applause. Climate change impacts our health, and children are particularly susceptible to this. And one of the things that I learned about was that in utero, that is a really big part of children in utero are impacted by climate change because their mothers are impacted by climate change. And so you can't even enter this world anymore without knowing what climate change is in your body. And that just devastated me. And they were just such beautiful, amazing speakers who were able to really articulate exactly how climate change is impacting the world and Montana specifically. You could take over.
Yeah, so again, just a truly incredible lineup of experts. These experts really validated and affirmed all the injuries that the plaintiffs described experiencing and connected the dots to climate change, to Montana's fossil fuels, to Montana's emissions. Steve Running was our first expert to testify, and he really started at the global, the big picture level of climate change. And we had to do that because the state denied all even basic climate science leading up to the case. So we had what actually I think ended up being an opportunity to really tell a whole story of climate change starting from the global level and then Dr. Kathy Whitlock brought those climate harms into Montana and described the various ways in which Montana is being impacted by climate change. Obviously the rising temperatures, changing timing and location of precipitation, more rain, less snow, and various other impacts being felt in Montana. And all of these impacts are unfortunately projected to get worse unless we get climate change under control. We also had Ann Hedges from MEIC, and she really laid out the story of how Montana has systemically approved all fossil fuel projects for at least 30 years. And at the same time as they're approving all these fossil fuel projects, she described the mounting body of knowledge of how the state knew all the way back in the 1960s of the dangers of fossil fuels and climate change. So despite that knowledge, they continued, actually doubled down, if anything, on fossil fuel activities and production. And then after Ann Hedges, Peter Erickson came in and he actually quantified all the emissions that Montana is responsible for. And he broke it up into 3 sectors. I don't know if you can read this, but the 32 million metric tons those are the emissions that are coming from fossil fuels burned right in Montana. And then there's 70 million tons of emissions from fossil fuels that are extracted in Montana and burned elsewhere, and another 80 million tons of fossil fuel emissions that are resulting from fossil fuels that are transported through Montana. So accounting for or removing any overlap, that is 166 million metric tons of CO2 every year. That is a very big number. And just kind of for comparison, that's the amount of emissions that come from Argentina, the Netherlands, Pakistan, all with far, far greater population sizes than Montana. So as I'm sure many of you know, Montana really is a hub of fossil fuel extraction and transportation and burning. And we really kind of laid all that evidence out in court at trial. Again, Olivia kind of touched on this already, but we also had expert testimony really bringing the harms specific to children and the plaintiffs and describing, importantly, how children are uniquely and disproportionately harmed by climate change in ways different than adults.
And a couple of us plaintiffs have respiratory issues, and that's a really big part of where children are particularly impacted. I have asthma, and a couple other plaintiffs also have other respiratory issues like asthma. And Dr. Byron was able to really explain this to the court, and Judge Seeley really was able to understand how we individually and collectively are impacted.
Yeah, and as you can see here, this quote, it says, climate crisis is the single greatest driver of health for every child born today, really underscoring the threats to children. But it's not all bad news, and we wanted to, again, kind of paint this picture of, urgency, but also hope at trial. And a big sense of that optimism and hope came from the testimony of Dr. Mark Jacobson. He has worked on plans for all 50 states and a number of countries, including the US, showing how we can decarbonize our energy systems, 100% renewable energy, no later than 2050. And so he described what that looks like in Montana, the cost savings, the energy efficiency, and really made clear that there are no technical hurdles anymore, not economic hurdles. It just makes sense. It makes financial sense. It makes it's totally feasible, and really the only hurdles are political. So in that sense, there is a path forward. We just need to take that path. So the state, we haven't heard a lot from the state, their arguments. It's because they didn't present any arguments effectively at trial. It was scheduled for a 2-week trial. So we put on our case during the first week, and then the state ended up wrapping up their case in about 2 hours at the beginning of the next week. And they didn't dispute any of the expert testimony, except to basically say, you know, Montana's emissions are small in the grand scheme of things, but that's about all they mounted as a defense, and their expert there was not effective in making that point. So as you heard, a couple months after trial, we got a great decision. And what was that like for you, Olivia?
It was so cool. It was like we knew we were gonna. I felt like we were gonna win. Like, how can you argue against climate change and how like it's literally constitutional in our constitution. It's our constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. How can you argue against that when you didn't even try? But so we knew we were going to win, but I had no idea on what scale. And in Judge Seeley's 104-page order, she explicitly laid out how each individual plaintiff was impacted by climate change, which meant a lot to us because we have dedicated so much of we've dedicated almost 5 years of our lives to this. It was 3 at that point, but we had been like fighting for this, and this has been like our passion for so long, and to be genuinely heard and genuinely listened to and genuinely have the courts listen to how climate change has harmed us and how our state has harmed us and violated our rights, because climate change is a constitutional right, but it's also a human right issue, and to have our courts understand that and to listen to us meant the world. And it was so cool to like get to see from like around the world the way that people listen to this. Like Montana, like we're 1 million people, and people like around the world gotta listen to us and know us. And I think that so many people think about Montanans as they don't think about us, I guess. And but now get to be the leaders of climate change of climate action and climate justice. And to have my state be part of that just meant the world to me because I love this place so much. And it was so special. And then all of the plaintiffs, we all got to like have like a Zoom meeting. They like were like, get on Zoom in 30 minutes. And we're all like, I'm on my phone because I was about to go camping. And I was just like pulled over on the side of the road and like looking at everyone's face to try to figure out like, did we win? Did we lose? Like, what's happening? And I'm like reading the lawyers' faces. They had the best poker faces ever. We had no idea what they were saying. And I was like, oh, and then they said we won, and like tears started streaming down my face because this case just means everything to me. Like, this is my passion in life, and like to know that we won just it meant everything. And I know the rest of the plaintiffs feel the same way. And I think that we all felt really vindicated.
As Olivia said, it's a 100-page order, so I'm not going to go through it all today, but I do want to give you a couple of highlights. Again, really, really strong decision. One legal expert said it's the strongest decision issued on climate change anywhere in the world, so really good compliment there. And the order walks through a lot of factual findings that are really important. These are binding, and they are available for you all. And I encourage you to use them in other proceedings as well. The court found that plaintiffs are being injured and that the physiological features of children make them disproportionately vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and air pollution. The court also recognized that Montana's greenhouse gas emissions are not de minimis, but they are nationally and globally significant, and that Montana's emissions cause and contribute to climate change and plaintiffs' injuries. And importantly, the court recognized that there are available remedies. These problems can be alleviated. And again, the court found it's technically and economically feasible for Montana to replace 100% of existing fossil fuel energy by no later than 2050 and as early as 2035. and that a 100% renewable portfolio by 2050, in addition to direct climate benefits, will create jobs, reduce air pollution, save lives and costs associated with air pollution. Reducing or converting to wind, water, and solar energy, the court found, would reduce total energy costs for Montanans by about $6.3 billion a year, 70% energy savings, and also reduce climate harms by $21 billion a year. And then, not surprisingly, the court declared that the statutes that we challenged were unconstitutional and the state was enjoined from implementing them, which just means they can no longer rely on them. So that's the law today, even as we're waiting for the appeal from the decision from the Supreme Court. And here's yeah, so this is a really important finding that I want to emphasize too. The court found that Montana's climate, environment, and natural resources are unconstitutionally degraded and depleted due to current atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases and climate change. So that means today, the current level of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere is unconstitutional. And what that means is the state should not be allowed to take any actions that further increase levels of greenhouse gas emissions, but actually need to put the state on the path towards decarbonization by 2050. So that's a really, really important finding going forward as we start thinking about kind of the next phase of implementing this order. And relatedly, the court found that every ton of greenhouse gas emissions exacerbates plaintiff injuries and risks locking in irreversible climate injuries. So many of the findings of fact in this order, they might not be surprising to you. They're things you're already aware of and familiar with, but having them included in a court order based on expert testimony that the state had an opportunity to dispute or present their own expert opinions on is really, really significant. And it's going to be really powerful tool and powerful court order going forward. So the state appealed the decision as we expected, and the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in July of this summer. And so right now we're waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court. The oral argument went well from our perspective. So we are optimistic that based on the oral argument and this incredible decision and factual record before the Supreme Court, that the district court's order will be affirmed. So keep an eye out for that decision. Should be coming any week now. And I just want to kind of touch on now at this point, once we get that decision from the Supreme Court, which again, we hope will be a win, that will be a really, really important moment in time to both celebrate and get ready to go back to work, because that decision is going to be a powerful decision, and we'll have the district court decision again, but we need to make sure that that decision is implemented to the way it's intended to be implemented, and that Montana fulfills its constitutional duties to not only stop increasing fossil fuel use and emissions, but actually start to decarbonize the emissions. So we're already starting to think through kind of next steps, what that will look like to make sure that the order is fully implemented. Love to hear from you all about what you think are the upcoming challenges and opportunities in this space to continue and to put Montana on track towards decarbonizing its fossil fuel energy system. You want to say anything else about that?
We're going to keep fighting. This is only the start. And hope is our weapon.
This slide doesn't want to advance, but that's okay. There's only one or two more. The next slide
Maybe if you strike a pose, that certainly helped last time.
Anyway, over here. It's okay. So the next slide it just had a number that we wanted to leave you with.
And that number.
And that number is?
75 million, right?
Yep.
There's 75 million children who were not able to vote in this presidential election, in this election. And that's why we as youth plaintiffs got involved in this case. We couldn't vote and we couldn't make sure that our state was listening to us. And so we and our country. And so we were able, some of us were able to vote. I got the numbers. So this was 6 of our first presidential election. And 7 of us can't vote yet. And 3 of us were able to vote in the previous election of the 16 youth plaintiffs. So it's just a reflection of knowing that our voices matter and youth voices matter, and we can't vote. And so you guys have to organize in your communities and make sure that you're getting your friends to vote and make sure that you are getting your communities to vote for us, because you guys are leaving the world behind to us, and we are going to leave the world behind to future generations. And we are fighting for future generations, and we are the future generations that you guys and your communities need to fight for.
Yeah, so we at our Children's Trust, we are getting ready to work harder than ever to continue to advocate for the rights of Montana's children and all children, to secure their constitutional right to a stable climate, and to protect a bright and safe future for them that they all deserve. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. I'm not going to pretend it is, but there are so many incredible opportunities that lie ahead as well. So it's time to kind of double down, get to work. That's what we're getting ready to do. We need to do it all together in partnership and collaboration, and stand up and support the backs of each other, and especially the 75 million kids that have no vote and have the most at stake. And with that, I just want to, again, invite you to reach out to me, to us at our Children's Trust, to follow our work. I'm sure you'll hear about the decision when it comes down, but take a look at that, take a look at the district court order, and let's start thinking about ways to really put this order to work, and to secure that right to a clean and healthful environment for all children. Anything else?
Thank you all for being here today and for listening to us, and for all of the work that you've done for Montana. I know you guys have been fighting for this your whole life, and so I'm just really appreciative of you guys laying the groundwork for my generation to keep fighting this good fight of this land that we love and this world that we love. So thank you.
So Nate and Olivia, thank you very much for being here. We are so lucky to hear firsthand of this incredible journey you've been on, this story you're going on, and we look forward to seeing what the results of that Supreme Court decision are going to be. But very, very sincere thank you for being here and sharing your story. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we do have some time for questions, and I know many of you do have some questions, so we do have about 10 minutes for questions. And again, if you have a question, make sure you speak into the microphone because people on Zoom will be able to hear you better if you speak into the microphone. Okay, and we have our first, I guess, speaker here. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, for all you in the room, we've all been here for other reasons, got good legislation on, got it passed. What happened? Either we didn't follow through or something snagged us up. And when we tried to keep going, it didn't work. And then they finally said, well, nobody's doing anything. And then they got rid of it. We cannot allow that kind of thing to happen again. So we really need to focus and get diligent and try to stop anything that tries to stop this momentum. It needs to continue because if we don't, we're going to die. This environment is not going to sustain any more trouble. And so for everybody concerned, think very seriously, get very active. Don't let other things get in the way or sidetrack you. Keep it in mind every single day.
Thank you, Carol. All right.
Can I just add something real quick to that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's a lot of people who are really worried about what's going to be coming in the next months and years, both I think in Montana and nationally. And it is definitely time to get ready to defend the progress that has been made. And we need to keep pushing forward for forward progress. So as again I said, there's already an unconstitutional level of greenhouse gases. So it's not enough to just defend what we've already secured. We need to keep going on offense and secure more protections going forward. So I think it's both. It's defense and offense.
Okay, next question.
Hi, I am a teacher and a parent. So I'm just curious if either our Children's Trust or the defendants from the Held versus Montana case have put together any resources, whether online or print or anything, that teachers or parents could use to help get their kids involved in this in some meaningful way, like whether it's specifically with things that come up following whatever decision is made, or if there are other like actionable items, things that like I could get my students and my own kids doing, because I know that youth care about this, but I think a lot of youth just have no idea what to do. So they just go home and watch their YouTube videos and play on their phones. And so what are some things that we can like get in their hands and get them to do?
I'm really glad you asked that question. There are some resources, and we've actually put together a trial website that has all of the videos from trial. So people can go online, you can watch Olivia's testimony, you can watch the testimony of the other plaintiffs. For those interested in the legal arguments, our expert reports are available. All of the briefing is available if you want. And there's also some books that are available, maybe not quite kid age books, but there's a collection of books that have been written about not just the the other work that we've done at our Children's Trust. And there is a section for curriculum. I'm not sure how much we have yet, but it's something that we are definitely thinking about and would love partners to help us with, because we do want to continue to educate and empower young people. And sometimes that means being a plaintiff, but obviously not every young person is going to be a plaintiff. So if you email me, or you might be able to find it on our website, ourchildrenstrust.org. There is a specific website for the Montana trial page.
I'm also building a toolkit right now with the Climate Mental Health Network, which is we're building a toolkit that's directed towards middle school and high school students. That's about mainly climate mental health, but there's also all of us are activists ourselves. And so we're building a toolkit on how to be an activist, kind of. It's mainly more about mental health. But I think a lot of it is just giving students a space to talk, like maybe have like a club. That was how I got involved in climate organizing, was a club in my high school. And so just having a club and a platform to be able to like have students have their voices heard in a certain spot, and just have a spot for them to collect together.
Thank you.
All right, very good. One more question. Sorry.
Hi, thanks for all the work and time you've put into this. Really appreciate it. My question has to do with people who have lung disease or asthma or have been affected. And then what you just mentioned, the mental health aspect that people have been affected. Are you all planning to sue the oil companies for damages in the future?
So
They have plenty of money.
there are various cases moving forward against the oil companies. We are in touch with a number of those lawyers, but that's actually not something that we are doing directly at our Children's Trust. And the reason why, so when it comes to addressing climate change, I think it's kind of an all of the above approach. So we need to try everything. Suing the oil companies is great. We don't do that because a lot of those cases are about getting money. And money is important if you have health problems or you have other climate injuries that you need to be addressed. But what those cases generally don't do, unless you're successful in driving a company out of business, which is hard with these major oil companies, they don't actually necessarily get the companies to stop doing what they're doing. So they can pay money and keep going on. And so the relief that we're seeking, it's instead of damages, it's called injunctive relief or declaratory relief. We actually want to stop the bad conduct from continuing. So it's a tool that's certainly worth taking. And also the other reason why we focus on governments is everything the fossil fuel companies are doing, they're doing it with permits from the government. So if we can get at that government permitting piece, it's another avenue to kind of to actually shut down the fossil fuel extraction and burning. So it's one of the resources, but it's not directly what we're doing.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. Let's give them one final round of applause here.